China has fired a nuclear-capable missile across the Pacific. Not in wartime, not in retaliation, but just hours after Australia and Fiji signed a new defense alliance. Beijing calls it a routine military exercise. Australia calls it destabilising. New Zealand is deeply concerned. Japan is sounding the alarm. Was this just a missile test, or a message to the entire Pacific? A nuclear-capable missile has just crossed the Pacific, not during a war, not during a crisis, but during a military exercise that has triggered alarm across the Indo-Pacific. China says it was routine. Australia, New Zealand, and Japan strongly disagree. And the timing has raised even more questions. China has conducted a long-range missile test in the South Pacific, drawing sharp criticism from regional governments that describe the launch as destabilising and inconsistent with efforts to preserve peace across the Pacific. China's state news agency Xinhua reported on July the 6th that a test missile topped with a dummy warhead landed in designated waters of the Pacific. Beijing said the missile test was a routine arrangement of China's annual military training, with prior notification to relevant countries. Chinese officials described the launch as part of the country's annual military training program and said relevant governments had been informed in advance.
At 12:01 on Monday, July 6th, the PLA Navy successfully launched a submarine-launched strategic missile carrying a training dummy warhead from a strategic nuclear submarine into relevant international waters of the Pacific Ocean, precisely landing in the designated sea area. This missile test launch was a routine part of China's annual military training, and relevant countries were notified in advance. The test is in line with international law and established international practices and is not aimed at any specific country or target.
However, the timing of the launch immediately drew attention. Only hours before the missile test, Australia and Fiji signed the new Ocean of Peace Alliance and the Vuval Union in Suva. The agreement commits both countries to consult and assist one another in the event of an armed attack and strengthens regional security cooperation. Australia's acting Prime Minister Richard Marles confirmed that Canberra had been notified of the launch on the same day, while Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong described the test as destabilising.
Thanks very much for coming. I can confirm that the Australian government has been advised by the government of the People's Republic of China of their intent to conduct a sea-based missile test into the Pacific. Australia has been clear with China that we regard this as destabilising to the region. Australia has been clear that this proposed test is in the context of a rapid military build-up by China, which is lacking in the transparency and reassurance as to intent that the region expects.
New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters also expressed deep concern, saying China had carried out the launch only hours after notifying Wellington. He warned that firing nuclear-capable weapons into the South Pacific was inconsistent with the vision of the Pacific as an ocean of peace and contradicted the spirit of the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone established under the Treaty of Rarotonga. Japan also criticised the launch, saying it had urged Beijing not to proceed and expressed serious concern over China's expanding military activities.
On the morning of July 6th, the Embassy of Japan in Beijing received an explanation from China's Ministry of National Defense that a ballistic missile would be launched in connection with the notification of the missile launch in question. In response, Japan conveyed its grave concern regarding to China's increased military activity. From the standpoint of the security of Japan and the region, the government has concerns in regard to this missile launch. We will continue to maintain the highest level of vigilance and surveillance while closely monitoring related developments.
Maritime tracking data indicated that 3 Chinese satellite tracking vessels had already been positioned across the Pacific well before the launch, suggesting the operation had been carefully planned in advance. Military analysts believe the missile was likely a JL-3 submarine-launched intercontinental ballistic missile, one of China's newest nuclear-capable weapons. This was China's first publicly announced Pacific missile launch since 2024, and experts believe it signals a shift towards more frequent testing of its expanding strategic arsenal.